Welcome to Successful Living with Bill Napick. Every week we talk about success and everything that goes along with it. You'll learn the principles of success, how to achieve success, and learn to overcome challenges that may be getting in the way of success in your life. You'll hear from Bill Napick, a radio personality and business development expert, along with insight from special guests. If you're ready to find your path to success or take the success you're enjoying to the next level, stay tuned. Successful Living with Bill Napick is on right now.
And welcome to the show, Successful Living with Bill Napick. And today, a #1 best-selling author, Mr. Brian Freeman. He is the author of many psychological thrillers, including Goodbye to the Dead, his new book, Marathon. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Bill.
Brian, it's great to have you. And also, your books are just tremendous. I finished your new book called Marathon. So let's tell people about your latest book and your writing.
Absolutely. Well, Marathon is a psychological thriller, just as you say, and I'm always focused on keeping people turning the pages so they find out what happens next. In fact, one of my favorite emails was from a reader who said she'd been reduced to taking illicit bathroom breaks at work to get in another chapter. That's me doing my job. But Marathon is inspired by things that went on in Boston a few years ago, but takes it in some very different directions. And it starts with an incident at the marathon up here in northern Minnesota in Duluth, and it turns into this manhunt around the city. So it'll keep you turning those pages until to the early morning hours.
It really has. That in itself is an art. So, and we'll talk a little bit perhaps how you do that, and the characters are so engaging, and it's almost like as an author of a psychological thriller like this one and your other books, it's like you're, in a way, a magician, as you say, look over here while something else is going on, and then you have a surprise for us. I love that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We want you to we never want you to know exactly what's going on, and you should always think you do, and then you turn the page and you find out, wait, I wasn't expecting that.
That's what makes it fun. And also, as we go along, as we're getting started, let's tell people your website in case they want to follow along with us.
Absolutely. They can find me at bfreemanbooks.com. That's all one word, bfreemanbooks.com. And they can find me on Facebook, same way, facebook.com/bfreemanfans. And they can find out about all my books. I've got 15 novels out at this point, so it's been a busy 12 years.
It's very interesting. And also, do you plan as far as writing each year? Do you say, I'm going to do 2 books, 3 books, or do you have that planned out?
I usually do because I'm usually working with the publishers pretty far in advance to decide what I'm going to do in any given year. So last year I did 2 books. I'm doing 2 more books this year, and that'll probably be the case next year as well. So you kind of have to plan your schedule around how you exactly want to get the creative side of it done.
And also, in a book like Marathon, you're dealing with, there's law enforcement, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's a lot of characters. How do you research these things? And give us an idea of the time it takes to research the various characters and things that they're involved with.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects of the research that go into it. I mean, part of it is location. I mean, I really like to give readers a you are there feel. Like you can drop down into every scene and you can hear it and touch it and taste it and smell it and feel it happening all around you. So I go up to Duluth in this case in Marathon, and I scout out locations for the book kind of like a film director would, so I can find just the right place for each chapter that sort of enriches the drama of what's going on there. And when it comes to procedural specifics, things like how the police would handle certain things, one of the great things about being in this business for a while is that my readers really become assets in helping me do research. So I've got a lot of great readers that have law enforcement connections. One of the county attorneys in Minnesota is a huge fan, and every time I'm doing a Duluth book, I usually come up and have breakfast with the former Duluth police chief and buy him breakfast and grill him about how the police would handle different things, and that's kind of how you start to put things together.
Interesting, because it makes me think that if you were to call the police department and say, I'm writing a book, can you tell me this? It's like, hey, we're too busy fighting crime. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I always get a little bit nervous that I'm probably on some government watch list because of all the rather bizarre Google searches that I do when I'm doing research.
Well, that's right. That's a whole nother subject of how we're being watched. I forget what I was watching something over the weekend that gets into detail of all the entities and cameras that are around our lives. Now, going to Marathon or any other books that you have, when you set out to write, say, Marathon, did you know the ending when you started?
Yeah, I usually do. There's a couple levels to each story, and the first level is what I call the backstory. It's all the secrets of the book. It's who does what to whom and why, and usually I've got that figured out before I start. But the second level is how do I unearth those secrets for the reader in a way that builds the most suspense and the most drama possible. And that can evolve a lot as the book goes on. So it doesn't necessarily change, what was going on behind the scenes, but as I develop the draft, I'm usually kind of massaging the suspense and tweaking it as I go. So that can actually change a lot as the book develops.
And as I think about that, being able to develop drama and also to misdirect and point over here and put details to the characters, how did you learn that?
In the early days, a lot of it is kind of watching how other writers do their thing. That's one thing I always tell aspiring writers is you ought to be a passionate reader as well. And, take a look at the authors that you admire the most and really get down to how do they do what they do? Check out how they are structuring the plot and what's going on in each chapter and what words are they using to build the characters out, and look at what you like and what you don't like, and from that point start to develop your own philosophy and your own approach and your own style.
Well, it seems to me also, as you were touching upon in the beginning, when things are described in a way, as you were saying, feel it and touch it and all those things, when they're described in that way, even when a plot is interesting and surprising and satisfying, sometimes I've read books where the plot doesn't even have to be that good, but the writer does such a good job at describing the scenario, the scenes that they're in. You're right there with and the characters are interesting. You're right there with them. It's like, hey, I'm in it just for that.
Right. Yeah, and if you put the whole package together and you've got a great plot and great characters and writing that really kind of drops you right into the middle of the action, that's always what you're looking for.
That's even better. Yes. Indeed. Also, at what point did you realize that this was going to be your profession, that you were going to be a professional author and write all these books?
I'm one of those people that writing books for a living has been my dream as far back as I can remember. I can remember sitting in sixth grade class starting in on a mystery novel. And I had a great eighth grade composition teacher that really recognized my love of writing. And she told me, when you come to my class, don't worry so much about the lesson plans. Just sit there and write your stories. And that was what I did through her class. And right after that, I sat down and started in on my first full-length novel back when I was all of 13 years old and spent 18 months, I think, finishing that. And from that point forward, that was what I wanted to do with my life was write books. And, publishing's a tough business. It often takes a long time to break in, and you kind of have to get your life experience and your craft experience together. But that was always what I wanted to do. And fortunately, it's a dream I never gave up on. And I just kept pushing on it until I broke through.
And how long did that take? If you give us a word about staying with things and being successful. Certainly persistence is so important, but how long did it take to really break through? And then when you did, what did that feel like?
Yeah. Well, it really does take a kind of a crazy level of determination. I wrote 5 novels in the course of my life before I even started in on my 6th book, Immoral, which became my breakthrough book. So it was a good, 20 years where I would be knocking on the door and sending out queries to agents and publishers and just getting nowhere. But, there were a lot of days when it would have been easier to say, oh gosh, why am I banging my head against the door of this crazy business? But, you just can't give up on that. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in what you're trying to do. And, so finally then, when Immoral broke through, it was just an extraordinary event in my life. Immoral came out in 2005. It was chosen as International Book of the Month by Bookspan. It was sold in 17 languages. So, to spend all that time trying to break through and suddenly to have that level of success, it really was a dream come true. It was an amazing time.
That's fascinating. Also, as far as when you have great books that people are enjoying, and then it goes to that next level of where they're printed in other languages, that doesn't happen with every author and every book, but tell us how that comes about.
Yeah, that's a fascinating part of the process. I mean, all those years I'd been trying to break through, I never really thought about sort of the worldwide nature of publishing and the idea of books coming out in other languages. In fact, when my first book, Immoral, was released, the very first edition that came out, the very first time I got a chance to hold my book in my hands, it wasn't even in English. It was in Dutch. The Dutch beat everybody else to print. So I tell people now they can read the books in the original Dutch. So, but it's great because you get a chance to see how different parts of the world approach the same book and how they treat different covers, and you hear from readers that you realize that it doesn't matter where you are in the world, and passionate readers have a lot in common, and they tend to respond to the same sorts of things in books, whether they're in Italy or Taiwan or China or North Dakota.
Well, certainly storytelling has been around since the dawn of man, and it is there's just something about a great story. And talking about covers, I love the cover of this book. It brings you in, and as we look at books that are sitting on a shelf, whether we're at an airport, a bookstore, there's just something about browsing, and that cover does a lot of work sometimes to sell a book, I think.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the old joke, don't judge a book by a cover. Well, the fact is that's what everybody does. I mean, the cover is the first thing you see, and that's what's got to get you to pick that book up off the shelf. And you're right. I just love the cover of Marathon. Usually, when we're working with the publisher on a cover, you end up going through multiple iterations and different design options as you think about what works well. But they came up with this cover idea for Marathon, and I think all of us just immediately said, "Yeah, that's the one."
Yes, indeed. The elements of this cover, including the colors that are used and then the images and the person on there, it really, and even the way your name is brought forth right at the front. We're talking with Brian Freeman. He is the author of the latest book called Marathon. Brian, also tell us about, as far as the characters, certainly in this book, that the characters work so well, and each character has a motive of some sort. You bring us into their lives and how they feel about things, and then it all works together. But tell us about motives and the character interaction that takes place from your perspective.
Yeah, that's the kind of book I like to write. I don't write about superheroes. I don't write about supervillains. I like to take ordinary people and put them in some dark and difficult situations and see how the ripple effects of a crime change their lives. So in a book like Marathon, it certainly involves the Duluth police lieutenant, my hero, Jonathan Stride, but there are ordinary people that are the heroes in this book as well, and some of them have their lives turned upside down, and some of them make some pretty significant mistakes. But the point is to get the reader emotionally engaged with all these characters and to really sort of make their struggle their own so that they really care about what happens to them in the end.
And I want to go to the various scenes throughout the book. And again, I won't give anything away, but I could probably use several examples. But the one, because it's at the end of the book, that really was so vivid when one of the characters is meeting another character, and let's just say a restaurant, but that's all I'll say. Truly, it is so vivid. I mean, just to take, let's say, that particular scene, and when people pick up the book Marathon and they're at the last chapter, they'll maybe see what we're talking about. But to make it so vivid, let's say, how many times did you write those final chapters to just turn up the colors and everything?
Yeah. I'm kind of a fanatical editor, and I'll go back over the scenes, time and time again, tweaking every last word, because I want to make sure that I'm never getting between the reader and the story or the reader and the characters. I want the characters kind of speaking directly to the reader, and I want the action flowing directly to the reader, and I don't want them to feel me as part of that process. So yeah, you're constantly kind of rewriting and rereading and tweaking every word just to make sure that kind of every word in a scene has impact and that you don't have anything extraneous. You've got just what you need to conjure that drama and convey that power.
That cannot be easy to do because you're using the English language. And that in itself, putting all these words together in a book is a puzzle. And then you have the story and plot and characters, and that's a puzzle for the readers. It's magnificent when it all comes together.
Well, and that's and you're always kind of trying to think on multiple levels because you're not just writing for yourself, you're writing for the reader, and so you're having to anticipate where is the reader with the story at this point, and what are they thinking about what's happening, and how do they feel about the character at this point, and what do they think is coming next. So that you're always kind of looking to sort of enrich that experience and sort of twist around their expectations so there's constantly surprise on every page.
So from, let's say, the idea that you had for this book, Marathon, to when the book was published, what was the timeline of such a project?
Well, on this one, in this one, the timeline has been, this book has been in my head for a while because it was 4 years ago when we had the tragedy in Boston that I first started thinking about this book because the marathon in Boston is such an integral part of the identity of that city, and up here in Duluth that's true as well. The marathon in Duluth is, in fact, I think it's the largest marathon in the country outside a major urban core, and so it brings tens of thousands of people into Duluth every year for the marathon, and so seeing that kind of parallelism, I just thought that I needed to write a book that dealt with some of those themes and brought that whole issue into Jonathan Stride's world. And so I've been thinking about the book for 4 years and really started working on it in earnest probably about a year and a half ago as I really started kind of getting the words on the page.
And when you were writing books, do you ever write more than one book at a time?
Well, I'm often planning more than one book at a time because I'm kind of thinking down the road to what I'm going to be doing next. But when it comes to actually getting words on the page, I try to limit myself to only working on one book at a time because otherwise I think it could drive you a little bit crazy.
I could imagine so. Now, and when you're writing, do you do this every day? Do you have a certain time, morning, evening? How does that work as far as your discipline?
Sure. Well, I was in the traditional workforce for so long that it kind of still feels natural to work on a Monday to Friday schedule, and so that's what I do. I mean, it really feels like sort of an ordinary job in that regard. I'm still working Monday to Friday, and I just sit at my computer and do my thing. And because my books are very intense, they're very emotional. There's so much going on with the characters. It kind of helps to have that weekend to take a little bit of a break and back away from the story. I think if you were trying to do it 7 days a week, it would probably get a little overwhelming.
As far as ideas, how do you capture the ideas? Let's say you're out there and you're doing something today, and all of a sudden you have an idea for your next book or another book down the road. Do you write the idea down right away and put it away, or how does that happen?
I do, yeah. I've kind of got a file on my phone of ideas for future books, and it's usually not kind of fully formed concept. It's often themes or true crimes or just little snippets of ideas that maybe make for an interesting element in a future book. And so I'll just quickly jot down a note about that. And when I get to a point of actually starting to plan a new book, I usually take out that file and print everything out. It's kind of like taking your nightstand drawer and dumping everything on the bed, and you sort of look at all these different ideas and snippets and themes and ideas and characters, and you start to look for threads that pull them together, and you start kind of playing out different scenarios to see what makes sense.
Also, I want to thank your media contact, Amanda Harkness. She did a great job of getting us together and also getting me the book. So just a shout out to Amanda. She did a very nice job, and it sounds like you have great representation.
It's a team effort getting every book out. I always think of myself as kind of the director of creative production, but I'm just one person in a big team that brings these books to the readers.
Yeah, we have to get the word out, no question about it. bfreemanbooks.com. That's Brian Freeman's website. His latest book is Marathon. Brian, what would you tell people, aspiring writers out there, whatever age, young, old, what would you tell people some of the things that have helped you be successful?
Sure, sure. Well, yeah, the first piece of advice I always give to aspiring writers is that 100% of unwritten books have never been published.
That's right.
So many times as a writer, you're your own worst enemy. I mean, it's very easy to psych yourself out and let those little inner voices of doubt kind of drown out your self-confidence. And so it's really easy to sort of lose faith in yourself as a writer, because it is such a personal, intimate process, and you're kind of doing battle with yourself as you get words onto the page. And you just have to think past that, and you can't let those voices stop you. You have to keep believing in yourself, and you have to keep getting words on the page.
And Brian, also, say with the last couple minutes here in the show, what would you like people to know?
I really hope that Marathon is a book that gets people talking. I've been telling people at every stop that I make that I hope you pick a book like Marathon for your book club discussion, because it really is a book designed to get people talking about the issues inside. And I've offered everywhere around the country that if your book club chooses Marathon, shoot me an email, let me know, because I'd love to join the discussion, and I'd be happy to come in via Skype or FaceTime or anything like that and be a part of your book club, because that's how strongly I feel that this is a book that folks ought to be reading and talking about.
And that's another thing I noticed in the book. You do reach out to your readers to make that connection. Also, the other thing I was going to say is that being a writer it is a great thing. Once you're successful, you could do your job in any city. But what is it that you love about Minnesota?
I've lived in Minnesota with my wife for more than 30 years, and we go a lot of different places around the country, and we have so many different wonderful places around the country. But Minnesota is still home to us, and Duluth and the Northland are great settings for drama. I always kind of tease the folks in Duluth because it's a great area, and here I am bringing all this murder and mayhem up here, but. There's just lots of creepy locales that I can use in the books, and I love that.
I'm sure you have some in your idea pocket on your iPhone right now for
there
future
you go.
for future use. But also, you were in Houston recently. Give us a word, as people are thinking, listening in Houston primarily. Certainly, people hear the show all over. But when you were in Houston, give us a few words of your perspective of Houston and how much you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I had a great event at the Murder by the Book store in Houston. Houston is fortunate to have really one of the great mystery bookstores in the country.
Oh, yeah.
Located there. Murder by the Book is just a terrific store. I've been there, I think, 3 or 4 times at this point. And we had a terrific event with readers to have them kind of come out and talk about the book. And I did some readings from a couple different books there. And I signed a lot of books, and I left a lot of signed books behind. So if anyone wants a signed copy of Marathon, all they have to do is head on over to Murder by the Book, and they'd be happy to help you out.
Now, while you were here, did you enjoy any great food?
I wish I had. That's the only trouble with book tours is I feel like it's kind of an unholy alliance between the airport, the hotel, and the rental car, and I never really see any of the places that I'm in. I sort of am gone before I even have a chance to blink. So I want to come back to Houston and spend a little bit more time when I'm not rushed.
Well, I'll tell you what, and we do have great restaurants, but they're saying we're going to be the 3rd largest city coming up soon, but certainly we're the 4th at this point. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Freeman. Go to bfreemanbooks.com. His latest book is Marathon. Brian, thank you for being on Successful Living.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bill.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Successful Living. Today, Bill Napick and Brian Freeman get his book, Marathon. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Brian Freeman.